You're losing money right now, and you don't even know it. Nobody believes this, but some of the coins in your pocket, the ones you spend every day, are secretly worth more than your car, your rent, even your dream vacation. I just found coins that most people ignore. And big mistake if you ignore them too. Before it's too late, check your pockets because this tiny detail could make you rich. These are forbidden, hidden treasures that change everything, and you'll probably ignore them if I don't show you. But stay with me, because what comes next gets even scarier, rarer, and far more valuable than anything you've ever imagined. Do not spend these coins. Look, I'm not exaggerating when I say this. This might be the exact coin you've already spent without thinking twice. A 1958D wheat penny. Sounds boring, right? That's exactly why it's dangerous. Because while most people see just another old copper penny, collectors see something completely different. Something they quietly chase. Something they refuse to let go of once they find it. And if you don't check yours carefully, you could be throwing away serious money without even realizing it. Now here's where things start getting intense. The year 1958 wasn't just another random year in US coin history. This was the final chapter of the Lincoln wheat penny era. The very last year these iconic wheat ears were ever produced before the design changed forever. In 1959, that means every single 1958 wheat penny carries the weight of an ending, of a closing chapter in American history. And when something ends, collectors get obsessed, because endings are limited. Endings don't come back. And that's where value begins to rise quietly in the background. But here's what most people completely miss. 1958 was also a time of economic adjustment in the United States. Post-war production systems were stabilizing, but the mint was still under pressure to produce massive quantities of coins for a growing population. That pressure caused subtle inconsistencies, tiny variations, die fatigue, metal flow issues, things the average person would never notice. But collectors? They hunt for those details like treasure hunters. This is not fiction. This is exactly how hidden fortunes are discovered. Let's talk about what this coin actually looks like in your hand. Because this detail changes everything. On the front, you've got Abraham Lincoln's profile, calm, steady, facing right. Above him, "In God we trust." To the left, liberty, and just to the right of his chest, that tiny 1958 date with a small but powerful D mint mark underneath it. That D stands for Denver Mint, and trust me, collectors don't ignore that little letter. That single mark can change everything about demand and value. Flip the coin over, and you'll see those iconic wheat ears framing the words 1 cent and United States of America. It looks simple. Almost too simple. But that simplicity is exactly what hides its importance. Because this design disappeared forever after this year. And once something disappears, surviving examples become quiet assets. Silent fortunes. Now physically, this coin feels light. But don't let that fool you. It weighs about 3.11 grams, made mostly of copper, 95% copper, with a small mix of tin and zinc. The diameter sits at 19 millimeters, thin enough to feel ordinary but with a distinct firmness when you hold it. The thickness? Around 1.52 millimeters. And the edges? Smooth, not reeded, something your fingers probably never paid attention to before. But now, you will. Here's the part that should make you stop and think. Even though millions were minted, finding one today in genuine, untouched fine condition is far more difficult than people realize. Why? Because these coins were used heavily. They passed through hands, pockets, machines. They lived hard lives. Most were damaged, cleaned, or simply lost. So when a naturally aged original surface coin survives, collectors notice immediately. And listen carefully, this is critical. Never clean this coin. I don't care how dirty it looks. That dark tone, that slight discoloration, that's not damage. That's history. That's proof the coin hasn't been tampered with. The moment you clean it, you destroy that original surface forever. And with it, you erase a huge portion of its value. This is where most people make a costly mistake. Collectors are extremely sensitive to these details. They look for natural toning, consistent wear, sharp lettering, even in circulated condition. They check Lincoln's cheek, the wheat lines, the edges of the lettering. Tiny things. Things most people overlook completely. But those tiny things separate a common coin from a six-figure opportunity. And yes, we're talking real money here. A 1958D wheat penny in fine condition has reached auction values around $140,000. Let that sink in. That's not a rumor. That's not hype. That's real auction behavior. Quiet, aggressive, competitive. Collectors don't just buy these coins. They hold them. They lock them away. Because they know supply is shrinking and demand is only getting stronger. So what should you do right now? First, check every 1958 penny you have. Look for that D mint mark. Don't rush. Don't assume. Second, do not clean it. Ever. Third, if you think you've found something promising, get it professionally graded. That step alone can confirm whether you're holding a simple coin or a hidden fortune. Because the truth is, people are still spending these every day without checking, without knowing. And that's exactly why opportunities like this still exist. But don't get too comfortable, because what comes next is even bigger. The next coin isn't just rare, it's the kind of coin that makes collectors nervous, the kind that disappears fast the moment it's discovered. And if you think this one was easy to miss, the next one is almost impossible to catch. Now pause for a second and think about the year 1963. This wasn't just another year in American history. It was a moment of tension, uncertainty, and transition. The United States was deep in the Cold War. Economic pressure was rising. And later that same year, the nation would experience one of the most shocking moments in its history. During times like these, the U.S. Mint doesn't slow down, it speeds up. Coins are produced in massive quantities, under pressure, with machines running hard, and dies wearing faster than usual. And when that happens, subtle differences begin to appear. Differences that collectors obsess over today. This 1963D Roosevelt dime came out of the Denver Mint, and at first glance, it looks completely ordinary. On the front, you'll see the calm, familiar face of Franklin D. Roosevelt facing left. Around him, the words "Liberty" curve along the edge, and just below his chin, "In God We Trust." To the right of his neck, the date 1963 is stamped clearly, and right beside it, that small but powerful D mint mark. That tiny letter is everything. Most people never even look for it, but collectors, they search for it like it's a signal. Flip it over, and the reverse design feels simple, but it's loaded with meaning. A torch stands in the center, representing liberty. On one side, an olive branch for peace. On the other, an oak branch for strength and independence. Around it, United States of America, and one dime. And tucked near the bottom, E pluribus unum. Every line, every letter, every detail matters more than you think. But here's where things start to get serious. This coin isn't just about its design, it's about its composition and how it aged over time. The 1963 Roosevelt dime was struck in 90% silver and 10% copper. That means you're not just holding a coin, you're holding real, tangible silver. It weighs approximately 2.5 grams, with a diameter of 17.9 millimeters. Thin, just about 1.35 millimeters thick, but dense, solid, and unmistakable when you know what to feel for. The edges are reeded with fine grooves that most people never count, but collectors do. Now let's talk about the part that most people completely misunderstand, the gray layer. That dull, smoky, almost lifeless surface that makes the coin look old or dirty. This is where people make their biggest mistake. They think it's damage. They think it needs cleaning. And the moment they try to fix it, they destroy the very thing that makes it valuable. That gray toning is natural. It forms over decades as the silver reacts with the environment. It's proof of authenticity, proof that the coin hasn't been tampered with. And once it's gone forever. This detail changes everything, because collectors don't just want shiny coins, they want original coins. Coins that have survived untouched. Coins that tell a story through their surface. And finding a 1963D dime with that natural gray layer in honest fine condition without harsh cleaning or damage is far rarer than most people realize. These coins circulated heavily. They were used, dropped, and forgotten. Many were melted down when silver prices rose. Others were polished, scrubbed, or ruined by people who didn't know what they had. So when one survives, naturally aged, properly worn, still carrying its original character, collectors notice immediately. And they don't hesitate. Here's what you need to check right now. First, the mint mark. Make sure that D is there and clear. Second, look at the surface. Is the gray toning even? Natural? Or does it look artificially cleaned? Third, examine the high points. Roosevelt's hair, the cheek, the torch flame. In fine condition, you'll see wear, but the details should still be visible. That balance between wear and preservation, that's what creates value. And listen carefully, professional grading is critical. You might think your coin is just average, but under expert evaluation, small details can push it into a completely different category. This is where hidden wealth reveals itself. This is where silent fortune becomes real. Because when coins like this hit the auction floor, things get quiet. Not loud, not flashy, quiet. Focused. Serious collectors step in. Bidding becomes calculated, then aggressive. And before you know it, a coin that looked like nothing becomes something people are fighting over. The market has already shown what this coin can do. In today's auction environment, a 1963D Roosevelt dime with natural gray toning in fine condition has reached values around $115,000. That's not a guess. That's not hype. That's real money changing hands. For a coin, most people would never even look at twice. Let that sink in. You could be holding this coin right now and not even know it. That's why patience matters. That's why attention to detail matters. And that's why so many people miss out, because they move too fast. They assume, they ignore. And in doing that, they lose opportunities that could have changed everything. So don't rush. Go check your coins. Look carefully. Feel the weight. Study the surface. And remember, do not clean it. Do not spend it. Protect it. Because once it's gone, it's gone. And just when you think you've seen it all, the next coin is on another level entirely. Rarer, harder to find, and the kind of coin that doesn't just slip through your fingers. It disappears before you even realize what you had. Most people don't even slow down for this coin. They see that dark brown color and instantly think it's worthless. Old, dirty, forgotten. But that exact mistake, that exact moment of ignorance, is how hidden fortunes slip through people's fingers every single day. Because this 1952 with D wheat penny doesn't shine, it doesn't beg for attention, it hides. And if you don't know what you're looking at, you will spend it without hesitation. Do not spend this coin. Now let's go back to 1952 for a second, because this year carries more weight than people realize. America was deep in the Korean War. Resources were under pressure. Metal demand was high. The US Mint wasn't working under calm, perfect conditions. They were pushing production hard to keep up with national needs. And when that kind of pressure hits coin production, something interesting happens. Quality shifts, dies wear down faster, and subtle variations start slipping into circulation. These aren't obvious errors, they're quiet differences, the kind that only serious collectors notice and chase. This 1952 with D wheat penny came out of the Denver Mint, and like many coins from that era, it was made to be used, not saved, which is exactly why finding one today in honest, original, fine condition is far more difficult than people expect. Because these coins lived real lives. They moved through thousands of hands, scraped against surfaces, sat in pockets, got tossed into jars, and most of them didn't survive in collectible condition. Now look closely at the design, because this is where the story starts to reveal itself. On the front, Abraham Lincoln faces right, steady and calm, just like every wheat penny. Above him, "In God we trust." To the left, liberty, and on the right side, the date 1952 with that small but powerful D mint mark just below it. That tiny letter, most people ignore it completely, but collectors, they zoom in on it, because that D ties the coin to Denver, and certain Denver minted coins carry unique characteristics that drive demand. Flip it over, and you'll see the classic wheat ears framing the center text. 1 cent stands bold in the middle, with United States of America just below it. And along the top edge, E pluribus unum, simple. Clean, almost too plain. But this design represents an entire era of American coinage that ended just a few years later. And once something ends, it becomes something people want to hold on to. Now here's where things get serious. That brown layer. That deep, natural, almost chocolate-toned surface that most people mistake for damage. This is not damage. This is age. This is authenticity. This is the coin telling you it has not been cleaned, not been altered, not been ruined by modern hands. That brown toning forms over decades as copper reacts with air and environment. It's slow, it's natural, and collectors love it. But here's the danger. People see that brown color and they panic. They try to clean it, polish it, restore it. And in doing that, they erase the very thing that gives the coin its value. The moment you clean this coin, you destroy its original surface forever. And once that's gone, so is a massive portion of its worth. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make, and it costs them more than they realize. Let's talk about how this coin actually feels in your hand, because this detail changes everything. It weighs approximately 3.11 grams, made from 95% copper with a small mix of tin and zinc. The diameter is 19 millimeters, small, familiar, easy to overlook. Thickness, around 1.52 millimeters. The edges are smooth, not ridged, and when you hold it, there's a certain softness to the feel, a warmth that only older copper coins carry. It doesn't scream value, it whispers it. And that's exactly why people miss it. Now here's what collectors are really looking for. They examine the wear patterns, especially on Lincoln's cheek and jawline. They study the wheat lines on the reverse. They check the lettering for sharpness, even in circulated condition. And most importantly, they look at that brown toning. Is it even? Is it natural? Does it show decades of untouched aging? These tiny details separate an ordinary coin from something far more important. Because survival is the real story here. Millions were minted, yes, but very few survived in a way that collectors consider desirable. Many were damaged. Many were cleaned. Many simply disappeared over time. So when a 1952 with D wheat penny appears with original brown toning, honest wear, and no harsh cleaning, it stands out immediately. And when it stands out, collectors react. Quietly at first, then aggressively. Because coins like this don't flood the market. They don't sit around waiting. When one shows up, serious buyers step in fast. They know what they're looking at. They know how rare it is to find one with the right combination of condition and originality. And they don't want to lose it. In today's market, this coin has reached auction levels around $143,000. That's not speculation. That's real demand meeting limited supply. That's collectors recognizing hidden wealth when they see it. And that's exactly why you need to pay attention. So what should you do right now? Start by checking every 1952 penny you can find. Look for that D mint mark. Don't assume every brown coin is worthless. Look closer. Study the surface. If it has that deep, natural toning, stop. Do nothing. Do not clean it. Do not try to improve it. Protect it exactly as it is. Next, consider professional grading. This step is critical. Experts can confirm authenticity, evaluate condition, and place your coin in a category that collectors trust. And in this world, trust equals value. And finally, be patient. The biggest mistake people make isn't just cleaning coins, it's rushing, selling too quickly, not understanding what they have. Patience is what turns a simple want-it into a life-changing opportunity. Because the truth is, coins like this are still out there, still being spent, still being ignored. And every time that happens, someone loses a chance at something bigger. But don't get comfortable, because the next coin is where things start to feel almost unreal. Rarer than this, harder to recognize, and the kind of coin that people walk past every single day without ever knowing they just missed something that could have changed everything. This is the coin people throw away the fastest and regret the longest. I'm serious, because when a dime turns dark, almost black, most people don't even hesitate. They assume it's damaged, corroded, worthless. They don't even give it a second look. And that exact moment, that split-second decision, is where silent fortunes disappear. Because this 1963 with D Roosevelt dime with a deep black layer doesn't look valuable, it hides its value. And if you don't recognize it, you will spend it without thinking. Do not spend this coin. Now step back into 1963 again, but this time feel the pressure of that year. The United States was balancing on edge. Cold War tensions, economic shifts, uncertainty building in the background. The Mint wasn't operating in a calm environment. Production lines were running hard, fast, and constantly. Dies wore down. Metal flow changed. And silver coins, like this one, were being struck under real stress. That pressure left behind subtle fingerprints, tiny characteristics that collectors study today with almost obsessive focus. This coin came from the Denver Mint, marked by that small D sitting quietly next to the date. And I need you to understand something. Most people never notice that mint mark. But collectors, they hunt for it. Because that single letter connects the coin to a specific place, a specific production environment, and a specific set of conditions that can make all the difference. Look at the front. Roosevelt's profile, facing left, calm but strong. Liberty wrapping around the edge. In God we trust, sitting just below his chin. And to the right, 1963 with that D mint mark. Simple, clean, familiar, But this is where people stop looking, and that's their mistake. Flip it over. The torch stands in the center, symbolizing freedom. An olive branch on one side, representing peace. An oak branch on the other, representing strength. Around it all, United States of America, and one dime. And near the base, E pluribus unum. Every detail is intentional. Every line has meaning. But the real story isn't just in the design, it's in the surface. That black layer, that deep, almost shadow-like coating over the coin, is where everything changes. Most people think it's damage. It's not. It's natural toning, formed over decades as the silver reacts with sulfur and elements in the environment. And when it reaches that dark black stage, it becomes something rare. Because not all coins tone this way. Not all coins survive long enough without being cleaned, polished, or destroyed. This kind of toning tells a story of time, of untouched preservation. And collectors don't run from it. They chase it. But here's the danger. You try to clean it. You think you're improving it. And in seconds, you erase decades of natural history. The black layer disappears, replaced by an artificial shine that collectors can spot instantly. And just like that, the value collapses. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make. So listen carefully. Never clean this coin. Not ever. Now hold this coin in your mind for a second. It weighs about 2.5 grams, solid, real silver. 90% silver, 10% copper. Diameter, 17.9 millimeters. Thickness, around 1.35 millimeters. The edges are reeded, those tiny ridges running along the side. But here's what most people never notice, the feel. Silver coins have a density, a presence. Even worn down, even darkened, they feel different. Heavier than they look. More serious. And that's your first clue. Now let's talk about rarity, because this is where things get intense. Yes, millions were minted, but how many survived with this kind of natural black toning, in honest, fine condition, without cleaning, without damage? Very few. Most were either spent heavily, melted when silver prices rose, or ruined by people trying to make them look new again. So when one surfaces today, untouched, naturally aged, carrying that deep black layer, collectors take notice immediately. And not casually, emotionally. Because this is the kind of coin that doesn't just fill a slot in a collection, it stands out. It tells a story. It represents survival. And collectors don't just want it. They feel like they need it. This is not fiction. This is exactly how auctions play out. Quiet room, focused eyes. Small bids at first, then suddenly tension rises. Because more than one collector recognizes what's sitting there. And once that happens, it becomes a battle. Controlled, strategic, but intense. And the coin? It just sits there, silent, while its value climbs. Today, this specific 1963 with D. Roosevelt dime with a natural black layer in fine condition has reached around $162,000 in the auction market. That's serious money for a coin most people would have ignored, or worse, cleaned. Let that hit you. A dime, something you wouldn't even bend down to pick up sometimes, could be carrying that kind of hidden wealth. So what should you do? First, start looking at every dime differently, especially older ones, especially 1963 second. Check for that D mint mark. Don't assume. Verify. Third, study the surface. If it's dark, don't panic. That darkness might be the most valuable part of the coin. And again, do not clean it. If you think you've found something real, something untouched, get it professionally graded. This step is critical, because once experts confirm what you have, everything changes. The coin moves from maybe to proven, and that's when collectors start paying attention. Patience matters here, because the people who rush lose. The people who ignore lose. The people who don't understand what they're holding lose. But the ones who pay attention, they win quietly. They hold. They wait. And they watch as something small becomes something life-changing. But don't relax yet, because the next coin is something else entirely. Not just rare, not just valuable, but the kind of coin that almost feels impossible to find. The kind that slips through collections, hides in plain sight, and when it finally appears, collectors don't just compete for it, they panic. This coin doesn't look valuable. In fact, it looks wrong. Dark patches, uneven spots, a surface that feels almost damaged at first glance. And that's exactly why people ignore it. Or worse, they try to fix it. They scrub it, polish it, wipe away those black spots like they're cleaning dirt off a table. And in that exact moment, they erase something that could have changed everything. Because this 1934 wheat penny, with no mint mark and those strange block spots, is not damaged, it's misunderstood. And if you don't recognize it, you will lose it. Do not spend this coin. Now let's step into 1934, because this year carries a weight that most people never even think about. America was deep in the Great Depression. Money was tight. Jobs were scarce. Every coin mattered, not as a collectible, but as survival. The US Mint wasn't producing coins for collectors. It was producing them for a struggling nation that needed every cent in circulation. And under that kind of economic pressure, production wasn't perfect. Metal quality varied. Storage conditions fluctuated. Planchets, the blank pieces of metal used to strike coins, weren't always pristine. And that's where the story of these block spots begins. These dark, uneven patches on the coin's surface aren't random damage. They're the result of how copper reacted over time, sometimes influenced by impurities, sometimes by environmental exposure, sometimes even by the way the coin was stored decades ago. But here's the key. When those spots form naturally and remain untouched, they become part of the coin's identity, a fingerprint of its journey through time. Most people see flaws. Collectors see authenticity. Now look closely at the design, because this is where subtle details matter more than ever. On the front, Abraham Lincoln faces right, just like every wheat penny. But in 1934, the strike quality and wear patterns can tell a deeper story. Above him, "In God we trust." To the left, "Liberty," and on the right, the date 1934. But here's something critical. There is no mint mark. And that absence, that silence where a letter could have been, it matters. Because no mint mark means this coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. And Philadelphia coins from this era carry their own unique characteristics, especially during the Depression years when production conditions were far from ideal. Collectors pay attention to that. They study it. They compare it. Flip the coin over, and you'll see the classic wheat ears framing the center. 1 cent stands bold in the middle with United States of America below. And at the top, E pluribus unum. The design is simple, but every line, every edge, every tiny detail becomes important when evaluating a coin like this. Now hold this coin in your mind. Feel it. It weighs about 3.11 grams, made of 95% copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. The diameter is 19 millimeters, thickness around 1.52 millimeters. Smooth edges. Nothing flashy, nothing obvious. And yet, everything about it matters when you know what to look for. Here's where things start to get serious. That brown surface, mixed with those darker block spots, creates a look that most people reject. But collectors, they lean in closer, because those spots, when natural and undisturbed, confirm that the coin hasn't been cleaned, hasn't been altered, hasn't been stripped of its history. And in this world, Originality is everything. This detail changes everything. Because the moment you try to remove those spots, the moment you clean the coin, you destroy its natural surface. The color changes. The texture shifts. And collectors can spot it instantly. What could have been a rare, desirable coin becomes just another damaged piece of copper. This is why so many people lose value without even realizing it. Now let's talk about survival. This coin came from one of the hardest economic periods in American history. It circulated heavily. It was used, reused, passed from hand to hand. Very few people saved coins in 1934. They needed them. Which means most of these coins didn't survive in collectible condition. They were worn down, damaged, lost, or destroyed over time. So when one appears today, in fine condition, with natural toning and original block spots still intact, it stands out immediately. And collectors notice, not casually, emotionally, because this isn't just a coin, it's a survivor, a piece of history that made it through one of the toughest eras in the country's past. And that story, that authenticity, drives demand in a way most people don't understand. When coins like this enter the market, the behavior changes. It's not loud, it's not chaotic, it's controlled but intense. Serious collectors step in quietly. They study, they wait, and then they move, because they know opportunities like this don't come often. Today, this 1934 wheat penny with no mint mark, natural block spots, and fine condition has reached auction levels around $170. Zeroth, that's real money. For a coin that most people would have cleaned, or ignored, or spent without a second thought. Let that sink in. You could have held this coin and never known. So what should you do right now? Start checking every older penny you can find, especially anything from the 1930s. Look for the date first. Then, check for the mint mark or the absence of one. Study the surface. If you see dark spots, don't panic. Don't assume damage. Look closer. Ask yourself, does this look natural? Has it been untouched? And above all, do not clean it. If you believe you've found something real, something original, get it professionally graded. This step is critical, because once experts confirm the coin's authenticity and condition, its true potential becomes visible to the market. And remember, patience is power here. The people who rush, lose. The people who try to improve coins, lose. But the ones who understand, who wait, who protect what they have, they're the ones who turn small discoveries into serious money. Because coins like this are still out there, still being spent, still being misunderstood. And every time that happens, someone misses a hidden fortune. But don't think this is the peak, because the next coin is on another level entirely. Not just older, not just rarer, but the kind of coin that collectors don't just want, they fear missing. The kind that disappears so fast, most people never even get a chance to see it. This one is dangerous in a completely different way, because it looks too new to be valuable. A 1985 dime? Most people won't even blink. They'll toss it in a vending machine, drop it in a tip jar, or let it disappear into pocket change without a second thought. But here's the truth that almost nobody is talking about. Some of these modern-looking coins are hiding quiet wealth in plain sight. And if you don't slow down and check, you could lose something that was never supposed to slip through your hands. Do not spend this coin. Now let's go back to 1985. A time when the United States was in a completely different phase compared to the earlier coins we've talked about. The economy was stabilizing after inflation shocks from the 1970s. Consumer spending was rising, and coin production was shifting into a more modern, high-speed system. The Philadelphia Mint, marked by that P, was producing massive volumes of coins to keep up with demand. Machines were faster, output was higher. But with speed comes subtle compromise. And that's where this story begins. Because unlike older silver dimes, the 1985 Roosevelt dime was made using a clad composition, outer layers of copper-nickel bonded over a pure copper core. That means what you're holding isn't just a simple coin, it's a layered structure. And over time, under certain conditions, those layers can react in ways most people don't understand. Those brown spots you see, That's not random damage. That's the coin revealing its internal story. When the outer layer experiences microscopic wear or environmental exposure, tiny areas of the copper core can begin to show through or influence the surface tone. Over decades, this creates those distinct brown spotting patterns, subtle, uneven, sometimes faint, sometimes bold. And here's the key. When those spots form naturally and remain untouched, they become a signal to collectors that the coin hasn't been artificially altered. But most people get this completely wrong. They see spots and they try to remove them. They polish, they scrub, they clean, and in doing that, they destroy the originality of the coin. This detail changes everything. Because collectors don't want a perfect-looking coin, they want a real one. One that hasn't been messed with. One that still carries the natural signs of time. And those brown spots, when authentic, become part of that story. Now let's break down what this coin actually looks like in your hand, because this is where awareness starts to grow. On the front, you've got Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile facing left. Liberty curves along the edge, bold and clear. In God We Trust sits just below his chin, and to the right of his neck. The date, 1985, with that small P mint mark. That P wasn't always there, by the way. Philadelphia didn't use mint marks on dimes for many earlier years. So when you see that P in the 1980C, it represents a shift in minting identity. A change in how coins were tracked and recognized. And collectors pay attention to that. Flip it over, and you'll see the familiar torch in the center, symbolizing liberty, flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch. Around it, United States of America and one dime, and near the bottom, E pluribus unum. Clean. Balanced. Modern. But again, the real story is in the surface. Now hold this coin mentally for a second. It weighs about 2.27 grams, lighter than older silver dimes, but still solid. Diameter is 17.9 millimeters. Thickness, around 1.35 millimeters. The edges are reeded, those fine grooves running along the side. And when you roll it between your fingers, it feels ordinary. And that's the trap. Because everything about this coin is designed to blend in. Now let's talk about rarity, because this is where things start to shift. Yes, millions of these were made. But how many survived in fine condition, with natural brown spotting, untouched, uncleaned, and still clearly defined? Very few, because modern coins are often treated carelessly. They're cleaned without hesitation, stored poorly, ignored, and over time, that destroys the very characteristics that collectors look for. So when a 1985p dime appears with original surfaces, visible brown spotting, and honest wear, it stands out, quietly but powerfully. Collectors who understand this don't ignore it. They study it. They compare it. They look at the pattern of the spots, the consistency of the surface, the integrity of the design details. Because these small differences separate ordinary coins from hidden opportunities. And when the right coin appears in the right condition, the market reacts. Not loudly, but seriously, because this is the kind of coin that challenges assumptions. It forces collectors to rethink what rare really means, and that creates demand. The kind that builds slowly, then suddenly becomes competitive. In today's market, this 1985p Roosevelt dime, with natural brown spotting and fine condition, has reached values around $85,000. That's serious money. For a coin, most people would spend without hesitation. Let that settle in. A dime from 1985. Still in circulation. Still being ignored. Still being lost. So what should you do right now? Start checking your dimes, especially anything from the 1980s. Look for the date. Find that P mint mark. Then study the surface. If you see brown spots, don't panic. Don't clean. Look closer. Ask yourself, does this look natural? Has it been left alone? Because that untouched condition is where the value lives. And if you think you've found something real, something original, get it professionally graded. This step is critical because once the coin is authenticated and evaluated, it enters a completely different level of recognition. And remember, patience is everything. The people who rush, who assume, who ignore, they're the ones who miss out. But the ones who pay attention, they catch things others don't. They hold onto opportunities others throw away. And they turn ordinary moments into life-changing discoveries. But don't get comfortable, because the next coin doesn't just challenge what you think you know, it breaks it completely. Older, stranger, and carrying a kind of rarity that makes even experienced collectors stop and stare, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Nobody warns you about this one, because it doesn't look rare, it doesn't feel rare, and it definitely doesn't act rare. It's quiet. It blends in. It's the kind of penny you'd hand over without even looking twice. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Because hidden inside that ordinary 1941 wheat penny is something collectors recognize instantly, but most people never will. And if you don't stop and check, you could lose it forever. Do not spend this coin. Now go back to 1941 for a moment, because this year is sitting right on the edge of something massive. The United States hadn't officially entered World War II yet, but the pressure was building. Industries were shifting. Resources were being redirected. The economy was preparing for conflict, even if it hadn't fully arrived. And during times like this, the U.S. Mint operates differently. Production becomes more urgent. Priorities change, and coins, especially pennies, are pushed into circulation in huge numbers to support a nation on the brink of transformation. But here's what most people don't realize. Coins produced right before a major historical shift often carry subtle characteristics that make them incredibly important later, because they represent the final moment before everything changes. This 1941 wheat penny with no mint mark was struck in Philadelphia. And that absence of a mint mark, it matters more than people think. Because Philadelphia coins from this era were produced under intense demand, often leading to variations in strike quality, die wear, and overall appearance. Collectors pay attention to these details with extreme precision. Now look closely at the design. On the front, Abraham Lincoln faces right, steady, familiar, almost calm, in contrast to the tension of the time. Above him, "In God we trust." To the left, liberty, and to the right, the date, 1941. No mint mark beneath it. That's your signal. That's your identifier. Flip the coin over, and you'll see the classic wheat ears framing the center. 1 cent stands bold, with United States of America below it. And along the top edge, E pluribus unum. This design had been around for decades by this point, but that's exactly why it matters. It represents continuity right before disruption. Now here's where things start to get serious. This coin was made of 95% copper with small amounts of tin and zinc. It weighs about 3.11 grams. Diameter, 19 millimeters. Thickness, around 1.52 millimeters. Smooth edges. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screams valuable. And yet, everything about it becomes important when you understand what you're holding. Because survival is the real story here. These coins weren't saved. They were used. Heavily. Constantly. People in 1941 weren't thinking about collectibles. They were thinking about daily life, about uncertainty, about what was coming next. So these pennies moved through hands quickly. They wore down. They got damaged. Many were lost completely. And then, just 1 year later, everything changed. By 1942 and 1943, the composition of pennies shifted due to wartime needs. Copper became critical for the war effort, which means coins like the 1941 wheat penny represent one of the last moments of normal copper coin production before that shift. That matters, because collectors don't just collect coins, they collect moments in time. And this coin captures a moment right before history turned. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where value begins to separate. A 1941 wheat penny in fine condition still shows clear details. Lincoln's profile is worn but visible. The wheat lines on the reverse are still defined, and the lettering remains readable. But more importantly, the surface. That natural brown toning, that slightly aged, even coloration that tells you the coin hasn't been cleaned, hasn't been altered, hasn't been stripped of its identity. This detail changes everything, because the moment someone tries to clean this coin, they destroy that original surface. The color becomes unnatural. The texture changes, and collectors can spot it instantly. What could have been a rare, desirable piece becomes just another damaged coin. So listen carefully, never clean this coin. Not ever. Now here's what collectors are actually looking for. They examine the high points, Lincoln's cheek, jawline, hair. They study the wheat ears on the reverse. They check the spacing of the letters, the sharpness of the strike, the overall balance of wear and preservation. And when all of those elements come together in a naturally aged coin, it stands out. And when it stands out, it gets attention. Quiet attention at first, then serious attention. Because coins like this don't flood the market. They appear occasionally, and when they do, collectors recognize the opportunity immediately. They know that supply is shrinking. They know that demand is growing. And they know that once a coin like this is gone, it's not coming back anytime soon. In today's market, a 1941 wheat penny with no mint mark, in fine, original condition, has reached around $172,000. That's real, documented value. For a coin that most people would have spent without a second thought. Let that sink in. A single penny, carrying that kind of hidden wealth. And still, people are losing them every day. So what should you do? Start by checking every wheat penny you have. Look for the date, 1941. Then check for the mint mark or the absence of one. Study the surface. Look for natural toning. Avoid anything that looks cleaned or artificially bright. And if you find something that looks right, don't rush. Get it professionally graded, because that step transforms uncertainty into confirmation. It tells collectors exactly what they're looking at. And that's when the real demand begins. Patience is everything here. The people who rush, lose. The people who ignore, lose. But the ones who pay attention, who understand, who protect what they find, they're the ones who turn small discoveries into life-changing outcomes. Because coins like this are still out there, still circulating, still being overlooked. And every time that happens, someone misses a silent fortune. But don't think this is the peak. because the next coin is something else entirely. Older than this, far more elusive, and carrying a kind of rarity that makes collectors nervous the moment it appears. Because if you miss it once, you may never see it again. Imagine this for a second. A coin so quiet, so ordinary, that even collectors once overlooked it. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because it didn't look valuable. No shine, no sparkle. Just a soft, grey surface that feels almost lifeless. And that's exactly why this 1956D Roosevelt dime is so dangerous. Because the moment you ignore it is the moment you lose it. This coin doesn't beg for attention. It waits for someone smart enough to recognize what it really is. Do not spend this coin. Now let's go back to 1956, because this year sits in a powerful moment of American history. The country was in the middle of the Cold War, balancing economic growth with constant global tension. Industry was booming, but pressure never disappeared. The U.S. Mint was producing coins at a steady pace to support a growing economy. But even in stability, there's stress. Machines run longer. Dies wear down. Subtle imperfections begin to form. And those tiny details become everything decades later. This particular dime came out of the Denver Mint, marked by that small D next to the date. And I need you to understand something. This is not just a letter. It's a signal, a marker of origin. Because coins from different mints, even in the same year, can carry completely different characteristics. And collectors know this. They look for it. They depend on it. Now look closely at the design. On the front, Franklin D. Roosevelt faces left, his profile calm but detailed. Around him, Liberty curves along the edge. Just below his chin, In God We Trust. And to the right, 1956 with that D mint mark. Everything looks standard, familiar, easy to ignore. Flip it over and you'll see the torch in the center, symbolizing liberty, flanked by an olive branch for peace and an oak branch for strength. Around the edge, United States of America and one dime. And near the bottom, E pluribus unum. It's a design that feels simple, but every line, every curve, every detail becomes critical when collectors evaluate it. Now here's where the real story begins, the gray layer. That soft, muted, almost dusty tone that covers the surface of the coin. Most people think it means the coin is old and worn out, but in reality, it means the coin has survived untouched. That gray toning forms naturally over time as the silver reacts with its environment. It's slow, it's consistent, and when it appears evenly across the surface, it becomes a sign of authenticity. This detail changes everything, because collectors don't want artificially bright coins. They don't trust shine that looks too new. What they want is originality. A coin that hasn't been cleaned, hasn't been polished, hasn't been stripped of its natural surface. And this is where people make their biggest mistake. They see that gray layer and they try to remove it. They clean the coin, they polish it, and in seconds, they destroy decades of natural aging. So listen carefully, never clean this coin. Not under any circumstances. That gray layer is not a flaw. It's the reason the coin holds value. Now let's talk about how this coin feels in your hand, because this is something most people never pay attention to. It weighs approximately 2.5 grams, made of 90% silver and 10% copper. The diameter is 17.9 millimeters. Thickness, around 1.35 millimeters. The edges are reeded, fine grooves running along the side. But here's what matters most, the density. Silver coins feel different. Even when worn, even when toned, they carry a certain weight, a certain presence. It's subtle, but once you recognize it, you never forget it. And that's your advantage. Now let's talk about rarity. Yes, millions of these dimes were minted, but how many survived in fine condition, with natural grey toning, untouched, uncleaned, and still clearly detailed? Very few, because over time these coins were heavily used. Many were melted down when silver prices increased. Others were cleaned by people who didn't understand what they had. And many simply disappeared into circulation, worn beyond recognition. So when one appears today, with original surfaces intact, it stands out immediately. And collectors notice, quietly at first, then with intensity. Because coins like this don't just fill a gap in a collection, they represent something more. A preserved moment. A piece of history that made it through decades without losing its identity. And when that realization hits, demand follows. In today's market, this 1956 with D. Roosevelt dime with natural grey toning in fine condition has reached around $138,000. That's real money. For a coin that most people would have ignored or cleaned or spent without hesitation. Let that settle in. A dime, carrying that kind of hidden wealth. So what should you do right now? Start checking every dime you come across, especially anything from the 1950 cents. Look for the date. Find that D mint mark. Then study the surface. If you see that soft grey toning, stop. Don't touch it. Don't clean it. Protect it, because that untouched condition is where the value lives. Next, if you believe you've found something real, get it professionally graded. This step is critical. It confirms authenticity, evaluates condition, and places your coin in a category that collectors trust. And in this market, trust equals demand. Finally, be patient. The biggest mistakes come from rushing, from assuming, from not understanding what you're holding. But when you slow down, when you pay attention, when you protect what you find, that's when everything changes. Because coins like this are still out there, still being spent, still being ignored. And every time that happens, someone loses a silent fortune. But don't get comfortable, because the next coin is something collectors don't just want, they chase it. Harder, faster, with a level of urgency that turns quiet auctions into intense battles. Because once it appears, it doesn't stay available for long. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you actually looked at a penny before spending it? Not glanced, not assumed, but really looked. Because there's a specific coin, quiet, copper, almost invisible, that people pass every single day without realizing they just let go of something extraordinary. The 1953 wheat penny doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shine. It doesn't beg. It waits. And if you don't recognize it in time, it's gone. Do not spend this coin. Now let's rewind to 1953, a year sitting right in the middle of post-war America. The country was rebuilding, expanding, growing fast, but that growth came with pressure. The Korean War had just ended. Resources had been stretched. The economy was shifting gears again. And during times like this, the U.S. Mint wasn't slowing down. It was pushing production to meet demand across a rapidly changing nation. But here's where things get interesting, because this coin didn't come from Philadelphia or Denver. It came from the San Francisco Mint, marked by that small but powerful S beneath the date. And if you've been paying attention, you already know that mint marks aren't just letters. They're signals. They tell collectors where the coin was born, and more importantly, under what conditions it was created. San Francisco coins from this era carry a certain reputation, slightly different strike characteristics, subtle variations in detail, and sometimes a level of rarity that doesn't match their original mintage numbers. Because survival, not production, is what truly defines value. Now look closely at the design. On the front, Abraham Lincoln faces right, calm, and familiar. Above him, "In God We Trust." To the left, "Liberty." And to the right, 1953, with that small S mint mark just below it. That tiny letter, most people never notice it. But collectors, they search for it first. Flip the coin over, and you'll see the classic wheat ears framing the center text. 1 cent bold in the middle, United States of America just below, and E pluribus unum arching across the top. It's a design that had been around for decades, but by 1953, it was nearing the end of its life. Just a few years later, it would disappear forever. And when something disappears, demand begins. Now let's talk about how this coin actually feels, because this is something most people never think about. It weighs approximately 3.11 grams, made from 95% copper with a small mix of tin and zinc. The diameter is 19 millimeters. Thickness, around 1.52 millimeters. Smooth edges, warm tone, nothing flashy. And that's the trap, because everything about this coin is designed to blend in, to go unnoticed, to be spent without hesitation. But here's where things shift. The 1953S wheat penny is not just about its design or its metal, it's about its survival. These coins circulated heavily. They were used in everyday transactions, passed from hand to hand, worn down over time. And unlike earlier decades, fewer people were saving coins by the 1950S, which means many of these simply didn't survive in collectible condition. So when one appears today, in fine condition, with clear details and original surfaces, it stands out. Quietly, but powerfully. Collectors don't just look at the date, they study the strike. San Francisco coins often show slightly softer details due to minting conditions. So when a 1953S appears with strong, visible features, Lincoln's profile still defined, wheat lines still present, it immediately gets attention. This detail changes everything, because it separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. Now let's talk about surface, because this is where most people make a costly mistake. A naturally aged wheat penny will show brown toning, sometimes deep, sometimes lighter, but consistent, even, and real. The toning is not damage. It's proof that the coin hasn't been cleaned or altered. And the moment someone tries to improve it, they destroy it. So listen carefully, never clean this coin. Not under any circumstances. That original surface is what collectors trust. Without it, the coin loses its identity. Now here's what collectors are really watching for. The mint mark, clear and well-defined. The lettering, sharp enough to read without strain. The wear, balanced, not excessive. And the overall look, does it feel untouched? Does it feel real? Because when all those elements come together, something happens. Demand rises. And when demand rises, competition follows. This is not a loud market. It's not chaotic. It's controlled, but intense. Serious collectors step in quietly. They know what they're looking at. They know how rare it is to find a coin like this in the right condition. And they don't hesitate. In today's market, this 1953 with S wheat penny in fine, original condition has reached around $185. That's serious money. For a coin most people would have spent without even checking the date. Let that sink in. A single penny, carrying that kind of hidden wealth. And still, people are losing them every day. So what should you do? Start checking every wheat penny you can find, especially anything from the early 1950s. Look for that S mint mark. Don't assume every penny is the same. Study the details. Pay attention to the surface. If it looks original, untouched, naturally aged, stop. Protect it. And if you believe you've found something real, get it professionally graded. This step is critical. It confirms authenticity, evaluates condition, and places your coin in a category that collectors trust. Because in this world, trust drives value. And finally, be patient. The biggest opportunities are lost by people who rush, who assume, who don't take the time to understand what they're holding. But the ones who do, they see what others miss. They hold what others spend. And they turn ordinary coins into life-changing discoveries. But don't think this is the end, because the next coin, the final one, is something else entirely. Rarer than everything we've covered. More shocking, more dangerous to ignore. And the kind of coin that, if you've ever had it in your hand and let it go, you'll never forget that moment. This is the coin that tricks everyone, not because it's rare, but because it looks tired, worn, faded, like it's already lived its life and has nothing left to offer. That old look, that slightly dull surface, that soft grey tone with hints of age, that's exactly what makes people ignore it. They don't see value, they see something ready to be spent. And that's the moment everything is lost. Because this 1953 with D. Roosevelt dime doesn't scream wealth, it hides it. Do not spend this coin. Next up, this is the coin that tricks everyone, not because it's rare, but because it looks tired, worn, faded, like it's already lived its life and has nothing left to offer. That old look, that slightly dull surface, that soft grey tone with hints of age, that's exactly what makes people ignore it. They don't see value, they see something ready to be spent. And that's the moment everything is lost. Because this 1953 with D. Roosevelt dime doesn't scream wealth, it hides it. Do not spend this coin. Now let's go back to 1953 again. But this time, focus on what was happening beneath the surface. America was transitioning out of the Korean War period. The economy was stabilizing, but pressure hadn't disappeared. The mint was still operating at a high pace, producing coins to keep up with circulation demands across a growing country. And when production runs continuously like that, dies begin to wear, details soften, and coins start leaving the presses with subtle differences that most people never notice. This dime came from the Denver Mint, marked by that small D next to the date. And I want you to understand something clearly. That tiny letter is not a small detail. It's everything. Because it ties this coin to a specific production environment, a specific set of machines, and a specific moment in time. And collectors, they don't ignore that. They focus on it first. Look at the front of the coin. Roosevelt's profile faces left, calm, steady, almost timeless. Around him, liberty. Below his chin, in God we trust. And to the right, 1953 with that D mint mark. It feels familiar, predictable, easy to overlook. But that's your first mistake. Flip the coin over, and the reverse tells a deeper story. The torch stands tall in the center, symbolizing liberty. On one side, an olive branch. On the other, an oak branch. Around the edge, United States of America and one dime. And near the bottom, E pluribus unum. Every detail is clean, balanced, and intentional. But here's where things shift. That old look you see, the slightly worn surface, the soft grey tone, the aged texture, that's not damage. That's time. That's the coin surviving decades without being altered. It's proof that it hasn't been cleaned, polished, or stripped of its identity. This detail changes everything. Because collectors don't chase perfection, they chase authenticity. And a coin that looks naturally aged, with consistent wear and original toning, becomes far more desirable than something that's been artificially brightened. But most people don't understand that. They see dullness and they try to fix it. They clean the coin, they polish it, and in seconds, they erase decades of natural history. So listen carefully, never clean this coin. That old look is not a flaw. It's the reason it holds value. Now, let's talk about how this coin feels. Because this is something you need to start paying attention to. It weighs approximately 2.5 grams, made of 90% silver and 10% copper. Diameter, 17.9 millimeters. Thickness, around 1.35 millimeters. Reeded edges running along the side. But here's what matters most, the density. Silver coins feel different. Even when worn, even when aged, they carry a certain weight, a certain presence. It's subtle, but once you recognize it, you can't ignore it. And that's your advantage. Now let's talk about rarity, because this is where everything starts to come together. Yes, many 1,953 dimes were produced, but how many survived in fine condition, with that original old look, untouched, uncleaned, and still clearly detailed? Very few, because over time, these coins were heavily circulated. Many were melted down when silver prices rose. Others were cleaned by people who didn't understand their importance. And many simply disappeared into everyday use, worn beyond recognition. So when one appears today, with natural aging, balanced wear, and original surfaces, it stands out. And collectors notice immediately. Not loudly, but seriously. Because this is the kind of coin that doesn't just fill a collection, it completes it. It represents a specific moment, a specific condition, a specific kind of survival that can't be recreated. And when collectors recognize that, demand rises. In today's market, this 1,953 with D. Roosevelt dime, with that original aged look in fine condition, has reached around $143,000. That's serious money for a coin that most people would have ignored, or worse, spent. Let that sink in. A dime, carrying that kind of hidden wealth. And still, people are losing them every day. So what should you do right now? Start checking every dime you have, especially anything from the early 1950s. Look for the date. Find that D mint mark. Then study the surface. If it looks naturally aged, not shiny, not cleaned, stop. Protect it. Do not spend it. Do not clean it. And if you think you've found something real, get it professionally graded. This step is critical, because once the coin is authenticated and evaluated, it becomes something collectors trust. And in this market, trust drives everything. And remember, patience is power. The people who rush lose. The people who ignore lose. But the ones who pay attention, who understand, who protect what they find, they're the ones who turn ordinary coins into life-changing opportunities. Because this is not fiction. This is happening every single day. Coins like these are still out there, still circulating, still being overlooked. And now, you know what to look for. So here's the reality: 10 coins. 10 everyday coins that most people would never look twice at. And yet, each one carries the potential for serious money, hidden wealth, silent fortunes sitting in plain sight. The scary part? You've probably seen some of these before. Maybe you had them. Maybe you spent them. Maybe they're sitting somewhere right now, waiting for you to finally notice. This is why attention changes everything. Because the difference between losing money and finding it is awareness. So before you spend another coin, check it. Before you ignore that old penny or dime, look closer. Because what seems ordinary might be the one thing that changes everything. And trust me, this is just the beginning. There are coins out there even rarer than these, even more valuable, and even harder to recognize. So if you think this was shocking, wait until you see what's coming next. Stay alert, stay curious, and never underestimate what's hiding in your pocket.